I want to start tonight a series, and it's just been kind of marinating in me for a while. We all face trials and temptations. And again, it's not a sin to be tempted, okay? We need to understand that Jesus was tempted. So we know it's not a sin to be tempted. When it turns into sin, it's when we yield to that temptation. Okay, so temptation is a solicitation to do evil. Basically, that's the long and short of it. So I've been thinking, because in my own life, I struggle with things, and I'm sure we all struggle with different things. If we go around the room, and we're not going to, we could all tell something that we struggle with that would be considered sinful. I mean, let's face it, we're still living in this fleshly body, and we have, if we're born again child of God, we have the Spirit within us. But we also have that old nature. And man, there is a war going on inside of us that we are fighting, and if we're not careful, we'll just give in, give up, give out, whatever you want to say. And so I've been thinking about slaying sinful giants. And next week we'll probably meet in the fellowship hall, and if I can, I want to try to maybe make up a worksheet. If not, you'll want to take notes, because I'm guessing that we all struggle with some of that. I mean, murder is not something that, well, some days it is something that I struggle with. If I had Brother Lloyd's job, it'd be a real problem. I just mount a couple of 50 calibers under the hood of that truck, and but there's all kinds of things that people struggle with. And here's how we justify wrong decisions. You see, there's this war going on. Good is the enemy of better. Good and better are the enemy of best. Is this decision that I'm making, is this the best decision, or is it only good, or is it only better than good? I never get that right. I'm shocked I got it right for a change. Good, better, and best. I mean, it's good to go places and do things. Not during church time. Like the guy that named his bass boat Visitation. Where were you on Sunday morning? I was out on visitation. Right. And let's face it, folks, we know what's right and wrong, because the Spirit of God lives in us. And when we do wrong, you get that little twinge in your spirit that says, that wasn't right. I have said things, and as soon as I said it, it's like, ugh. I've done things. As soon as I did it, it's like, ugh. I'm guessing I'm not the only one. So, how do we deal with this stuff? Well, the best way to deal with it is to form a defense ahead of time. And that's what Nehemiah did when he was rebuilding the wall. And we'll not go there tonight. I'm telling you, I have enough material to keep you till after lunch tomorrow. I won't. Lloyd said, preach on, I'm off tonight. I'm sorry, brother. I hate to pick on you, but I worked late shift for a lot of years. But when I started thinking about this thing of slaying sinful giants, I'll bet nobody knows where my mind went right to. 1 Samuel 17. 1 Samuel 17, that's where we will pick up tonight in the Word of God tonight. 1 Samuel chapter 17. This is so familiar. Most of you could probably give this account on your own. You don't even need me. First Samuel chapter 17, verse 1. Sometimes it's interesting to listen to people pronounce Bible words. I know y'all are sitting there going, man, I'm glad I'm not reading this. Some people, they're the Philistines. Some people, they're the Philistines. I just listened to Alexander Scorby and see what he calls them, and it's got to at least be in the neighborhood, right? So if you have a Bible app and it will read to you, there's your out. That'll help you with your pronunciations. Okay, 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse number 1. Now the Philistines, whatever you want to call them, gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah in Ephesdammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. Okay, so we understand there's a battle getting ready to take place. And so for whatever reason, the opposing sides are lined up, and you can go to the valley of Elah today. And by the way, they do not like for you to pick up stones and take them home with you. The only reason I know that is because I've had friends that tried that. Didn't turn out very well for them. But this is a real, literal place. This is a real, literal battle that is about to take place. This is a battle of God's people against the devil's people. This is good versus evil. And if we would just tell the truth, this is a picture of the battle that you and I face day in and day out, time and time and time and time again. So what did they do? They lined up one on one side of the valley, one on the other side of the valley, and they yelled insults at each other. I wouldn't recommend that. That doesn't solve any kind of conflict. Matter of fact, that normally makes things worse. So we find prior to this that David had been the court musician for Saul. And something you don't hear many men talk about, that probably came to an end. And now we find that Israel is once again going to battle with the Philistines. By the way, the Philistines, normally a lot of Bible commentators will tell you they're a picture of the flesh. I would have to agree. To me, they remind me of chihuahuas. It just won't go away. Always there. Just yep at your heels. Isn't that how the enemy is? I mean, he don't have to trick us into doing big things. Just little things. Make us so busy we don't have time to read our Bible. Make us so busy we don't have time to pray. Tell you in your mind that someone did something maybe on purpose when they really didn't. Why? Because those kind of things separate us from God, put us in a place where He will not hear our prayers. He doesn't have to draw us out to be a bank robber. He doesn't even care if we do good things. He just wants to make us not usable. And so we find the children of Israel lined up at the valley, getting ready to fight a battle. Now, they did things a lot different in those days. There wasn't, the government didn't provide a chow hall for the soldiers. The soldiers' families provided that food, which is why we find David being charged by his father to take food to his brothers. And it also says to take cheese to the military leaders. What's he doing? Making sure people were fed because he wants them to win the battle. David is obedient. He's doing what his father tells him to do. He goes to the camp of Israel, delivers what he has brought, and then all of a sudden, here comes this giant. Steps out, curses Israel's God. Just kind of, Now, mind you, David's a warrior. Even as a young man, he was a fighter. We don't like that in the modern day that we live in. That's looked down upon. I don't care. Look down on it. We wouldn't be a free nation if it wasn't for fighting. And we need to quit fighting against each other and start working together. David, as we know, was a shepherd. A shepherd would have had a staff with a crook on it to take the sheep by the neck and yank them back. But David also knew how to use a rod, and that was a shorter stick that could be thrown like a javelin. And shepherds, they were dangerous with that javelin. So David is this young man who's accustomed to fighting battles, sees this giant come out, curse the armies of Israel, and curse God Almighty, and he's looking around at these men who are supposed to be soldiers, and they're all hiding. It will do us absolutely zero good to hide from our sinful habits. The Bible clearly says, be sure your sin will find you out. It will find us. David, being zealous toward God, looks at these guys and says, is there not a cause? So he ends up even getting chastised by his own brothers who start in on him. Who'd you leave with those few little sheep you're looking over? Now, I don't have a brother or sister, so I don't know what it's like to have brothers or sisters. I'm kind of thankful of that. And so they start railing on David, basically. But it doesn't detour him because he knows, because he sees right in front of his face that there is a battle raging, and the ones who are supposed to be the brave soldiers are tucking their tails and running. We cannot do that when it comes to this thing of slaying sinful giants. We have to have a plan. We have to execute the plan, and we can't back down. Period. If we back down, we're going to get taken out. And you know how this account goes. I think it's interesting that after David makes these bold statements, word gets back to Saul, and Saul's like, who is this kid? He was his own musician. Now, let's take into account that David could have been about 12 years old when he was the court musician. Okay? We all know that as we grow at a young age, we change a lot. So maybe David had grown and changed and Saul didn't recognize him anymore. So they bring David to Saul. Saul's talking to him. And David reminds Saul that when I was keeping my father's sheep, my sheep were attacked by a lion. I don't know about you, but that'd make me a little nervous, even in modern days with some of our modern firearms. Not only was he attacked by a lion, but he was attacked by a bear. And he told the king that he grabbed it by the beard and killed it. I don't know about you. I don't want to get that close to a lion or a bear that I could grab his beard. Because if I can grab his, he can grab mine. And he killed them both. I can only imagine Saul's like, we may be on to something here. But Saul does something, and I've heard guys go back and forth over this. Saul gives David Saul's armor to put on and then tries to send him to battle with it. One thing about a soldier wants to know that his equipment is reliable. If I'm going to war, I want to make sure that when I shoot that gun, it's on target. I want to know that if I put a bayonet on the end of that rifle, that it's not going to break off. I'm going to prove my equipment before I go out into battle. And David, in wisdom, puts off Saul's armor because he has not tested nor proven it. And what does he do? He picks up what he knows. He picks up his shepherd's staff, his sling, and it's called a scrip, but it's a shepherd's bag. It's the same thing. It's a leather pouch that they carried. And that's where he carried whatever he would put in the sling. And Saul says, okay, go for it. So David goes out to battle. What does he do? He stops by the brook. And we all know, we've sung the song in Sunday school. He picked up how many stones? 5 smooth stones. Now again, Bible commentators will hash this out. Why did he pick up 5 smooth stones if he had so much faith in God? A lot of men believe that Goliath had 4 brothers. Now, if you belong to me and somebody attacks you, if I know about it, am going to show up to assist you, which is the way it ought to be. I believe that David was just making sure if his brothers showed up, he was ready for the fight. He goes to the battle. Now, mind you, Goliath was a giant. In today's terms, he was probably about 9 feet 6 inches tall. He was not a little guy. I was looking around. This ought to be about right. He was about this tall. Don't you dare. The Bible doesn't tell us how big David was. He might have been a little bigger than what we are today. 9 feet 9 inches tall. David didn't back down. He took the battle to Goliath. He went right out there. And what did Goliath do? What giants do? Started running his mouth. Am I a dog that you come at me with staves, sticks, like little runt? Who are you going to take out? What he didn't take into account was not, he was looking at David's stature, but he wasn't taking into account the God that David served. And David put that stone in that sling. And I have watched videos on people who sling stones. I want to learn. And he hit the giant right between the eyes and the forehead. He didn't just hit him. The Bible says that the stone sunk in the head of Goliath. And he fell down flat. And I think that it makes me chuckle when I read it. The ironic part is when this big bad giant fell, David went right over and stood on him, took his own sword off of him, and cut off his own head with his own sword. Imagine how big that sword was for a man that's 9 feet 9 inches tall. I'm talking about slaying sinful giants. In our own lives, if we're not careful, our sinful habits will look to us just like that giant. And we'll look at it and we'll say, I just can't get free of this. Yes, you can. But you got to own the thing first. You got to own it. That's the problem. See, too many of us live in denial. I cannot stand to hear kids say, yeah, my bad. No, sweetheart, it's way worse than that. It's sin. David, by faith, did what God had called him to do, and God gave him the victory. A whole army together was too scared to move out into the valley and fight the enemy. But a boy with faith in God took the stones and the sling and the staff and not only went out to the battle, but he went after it. If we are going to kill sinful habits in our lives, we are going to have to be proactive and go after it. We can't just set, soak, and sour and think it's going to get any better. That is not how we get victory. Well, Pastor, how do we get victory? I'm glad you asked. I had 3 sermons tonight that I needed to combine into one. So I'm just going to cut to the conclusion because we are. Turn to Ephesians chapter 6. There's so much. There is so much in 1 Samuel chapter 17. I could preach a long series just on that. And I've wanted to for years, and I've never have. Most of us, probably all of us, are familiar with Ephesians chapter 6. Paul is writing and he gives us what we need to slay sinful giants in our lives. Ephesians chapter 6 in verse 10. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. The first thing we need to know if we're going to slay sinful giants in our life is we need to know the source of our strength. The source of our strength. We cannot do it on our own. We're like the drunk that goes out and drinks all weekend. Wakes up on Monday morning, got to go to work. So stinking hungover, can't hardly get up off the bathroom floor from the porcelain throne. Thinking, I'm no good on my own. I got to get back to work. That's us. We need to know the source of our strength. We face an enemy who is powerful, but church, he is not all powerful. He's the devil, but church, he's God's devil, and God has him on a short leash. He can't do anything that God doesn't allow him to do. But when we think about that, you can think right back to Job. God said, "Hast thou considered my servant Job?" We need to know the source of our strength. I think it's in the book of Zechariah. The address escapes me. He says, "Not by power nor by might, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts." That is how we will win the victory over sinful habits. Is we know and understand that it is not my strength, it is God's strength in me through the power of the Holy Ghost. Not by power nor by might, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Know the source of your strength. About 30 years ago, I thought I had everything under control. I can handle this. I ended up in the emergency room with a bleeding ulcer, almost dead because I'd lost over half my blood through a hole in my stomach. I thought I could handle it. And I was doing really good till I passed out. And you can't control anything if you're passed out. I thought I was in control. I thought I would make it on my strength. We can't do it in our own strength. It's His strength. Know the source of your strength. Secondly, if we're going to slay sinful giants in our lives, and this is the conclusion, this isn't even the message, we need to know what our weapons are. What are our weapons? Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 11. Put on the whole armor of God that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. Wiles are schemes. Or if you like the old black preacher, he said, the willies of the devil. He ought to give you the willies. Know what your weapons are. If a soldier goes to battle, they make preparation ahead of time. They get their pack together. They know what food supplies they have. They know how much ammunition they have. They know if their knife is sharp. They know if their weapon is clean. They know how many spare magazines they've got, and they know what they can do. They know their boots are going to need to be clean. Their uniform needs to be a specific uniform so it doesn't give them away to the enemy. They know what their weapons are. Do we know what our weapons are? We have to know. We have to know the source of our strength. We have to know what our weapons are. And we'll look a little further at that. We need to know the source of our strength. We need to know what our weapons are. And here's the big one, a really big one. We must know who our enemy is. How can we win a war if we don't know who we're fighting? That's one of the biggest problems, especially in this day and hour, amongst independent, fundamental, fried chicken eating Baptists. Nobody can get along. And a lost and dying world is laughing and going to hell because none of us can get along. Now, not so much in this area, because there's a bunch of us in this area that we're tight. We don't fuss and fight. But I have friends in other parts of the country that are constantly under fire by so-called brethren. Friendly fire kills people. We have to know who the enemy is. If you're married, your spouse is not the enemy. Parent, your child is not the enemy. Grandparent, your grandchildren are not the enemy. Some days it may feel like it, but it's not. It's the dirty dog devil using them, trying to get at us. Because he knows that he cannot take our salvation, but he can get us in such a place that God can't use us. And that is his whole scheme for you and I. As the pastor of this church, I have to be extra careful. Why? Because I'm supposed to be out front leading. And if I fall, then what happens? Hopefully the troops don't just keep on marching and walk right over me and go on. There are churches that are doing that. There are churches in this state that have not had a pastor for years, and they're satisfied with that. That's a problem. Because God has called the pastor to lead the church. He's the one out front, which means the pastor has the biggest bullseye on his forehead. I will promise you, you cannot pray enough for me. If you pray all day, every day, you still can't pray enough for me. I wouldn't ask you to. But if you think about me, you say a prayer for me. And especially for my family. But they have to live with me. Well, most of them do. We have to know the source of our strength. We have to know what our weapons are. We have to know what the enemy is. And here's the last one. We have to know what our mission is. We have to know what our mission is. We're not going to make any forward progress if we're out just running around in circles. When I was in junior high school, I had a friend who was an avid hunter and trapper. And he was really good with directions. Me, on the other hand, my so-called friend walked us in circles for a half a day one time. He knew exactly where we were at. I didn't have any idea. We come up out of the creek on 10th Street down by Country Club Road. I lived a mile and a half from there, and I still didn't know where we were. What was the mission? Get home. Where was home? You want to know what the mission is? Right there in the pages of that book. One of the biggest things, one of the biggest, most important parts of our mission is slaying sinful giants in our lives. But the beauty of it is we don't have to go it alone. He's given us everything that we need. He said, if you'll let me, I'll be your strength. I'll be your source of strength. Again, not by power nor by might, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. He's given us the weapons. You realize he's only given us, most Bible scholars will tell you that God has given us one offensive weapon. I say two. The sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. If you read verse 18 of chapter 6, he says, praying always with all prayer and supplication. Prayer is an offensive weapon. We have to know what our weapons are. And if we're going to do battle, we have to know who the enemy is. You can't just go around killing people unless they're the enemy. I'm talking about in a war. I'm not talking about just going out here and going to Walmart and mowing down a bunch of people. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about in a spiritual battle. We are fighting. And by the way, he also tells us, look at verse 12 of chapter 6. This ought to clear some things up. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That person you're looking at, most of the time, is not your enemy. It's a stinking devil using that person. And sometimes there are people out there that just hate us and want to kill us. I'm sorry, that's just the reality of the day and hour we live in. The news is full of it. We need to be aware of it. And I'm telling you, I keep telling you, church, when you are out in the, no matter what you're doing, where you're at, keep your head on a swivel. Pay attention. what we call situational awareness. Most people walk around like, I don't see anything going on. Wake up and look up. Know who our enemy is. And lastly, know what our mission is. If we know what our mission is, we would be less likely to veer off course. I don't know if you've ever used a compass. I've tried a few times in my life. But there's one thing about a compass is you don't have to be way, way off with a compass. Okay? You can be one click off on a compass. And you think you're walking straight down the line and you're going to walk straight out that door. It may even look like it for a while. But when you get way down the trail, you think, well, I'm not that far off. I'm not doing that bad. Things are going pretty good. I'm staying on course. And then all of a sudden you're like, what am I doing over here? You go one click off over here, 20 years down the road, you find yourself way out there somewhere. We've got to know what the mission is. Not only do we need to know it, but we have to execute it. The battle plans are right in front of us. But what good is it if we never execute? None. Doesn't do any good. I could go to the gym. I can sit on a bench in the gym all day. And I can come home, and the first lady could say, what have you been doing? I went to the gym. I don't smell like sweat. I'm not red in the face. What have I accomplished? Nothing. Know the source of our strength. Know what our weapons are. Know who the enemy is, and know what the mission is. And then, church, just execute it. Just do it. This is how we slay sinful giants. Sitting around with our head stuck in the sand won't solve anything. Matter of fact, it'll just make things worse. Because then the enemy will come wave after wave after wave after wave and just keep hammering us, trying to hammer us in the ground until we are absolutely of no use. Like I said, he can't make you unsaved, but he can get you into a place where God can't use you. Let's stand to our feet. Our heads are bowed, our eyes are closed. Father, thank you for your word, for the warnings. Thank you for the teaching that helps us avoid such things as